Hi, my name is Dylan, and I am here to tell you about Dawn of Iron. Dawn of Iron is a game that covers naval battles in the American Civil War. It is a time of transition between the more recognizable Age of Sail ships and the dreadnoughts and battleships that will lead us into the 20th century and beyond. It is an interesting and undergamed chapter in the story of naval technological progress. Dawn of Iron is a set of print-and-play rules from Scary Biscuit game. You can get it on Wargames Vault. There is a bundle that contains the core rules and a scenario pack for the Battle of Hampton Roads. It looks like this is currently about $9. There are also a number of expansions sold separately that are usually themed around a particular battle. They include the ship cards you need, the ships involved in the battle, and usually some scenarios and historical background material as well. The rules PDF looks professional and has good graphic design and layout. I found the rules clearly presented. I didn't have much trouble playing after only an initial read-through. You will need to print out components, which include damage cards, a few tokens, and the ship card. As for ships, there are many suitable 3D printable ships out there, actually on Wargames Vault as well. If 3D printing is not your thing, I've seen some cool full-color counters on Wargames Vault, which would also work well to get you started quickly. Of course, there are traditional manufacturers out there too for this period. You can get 1/600th scale metal ships that would be appropriate. I did get some of the ship STLs and have printed a few, but I actually used Tabletop Simulator to play the game with my friends who don't live nearby anymore. I'll put some links in the video description to all of this cool stuff. Tabletop Simulator is a great way to try out new games and play games with your friends who do not live near you. I got into making mods for it during the pandemic. I have a techie background, so it came easy enough to me, although I had a lot to learn about geometry and vectors and whatnot, which, maybe I'm still learning about. I have been working on a mod that handles the movement for naval war games in Tabletop Simulator, and I use this to play Dawn of Iron. I do intend to share a version of this mod soon, but I will redact any intellectual property I don't own or that was not already shared in other Tabletop Simulator mods. I would not share, for example, the rules PDF or images or the cards or tokens, things like that, which are being sold by the designer. Please support the designer and buy these things for yourself. You can play out historically inspired scenarios or build your own with a point system that includes upgrade cards that can add bonuses or abilities to your ships. That combination of ship cards and upgrade cards actually reminds me a little bit of X-Wing. When we start shooting, it reminds me a little bit of Flames of War and other games that have that roll to hit, roll to save mechanic. We'll have more on the shooting mechanics later. The cards also, you may see some Flames of War DNA in there as well. And that's not really a criticism. The cards are great, and both X-Wing and Flames of War are games I've enjoyed in the past. As for the gameplay, turns are divided into 3 phases. In the command phase, ships are given orders which will grant them additional abilities during the turn. Some ships may have to plot these orders a few turns in advance. The orders are not pre-plotted movement like you may have seen in some other naval war games, especially the older ones. I'm thinking of Wooden Ships and Iron Men. I'd compare this to another FFG Star Wars game. I think Armada has something similar where you're plotting orders for the ships, and generally the larger the ship is, the further in advance you have to plot these things. The most useful orders are probably the ones that allow an extra turn at the beginning of the ship's movement. In the next phase, called the control phase, players alternate activating ships. When you activate a ship, you move the ship and then resolve shooting for the ship. Movement for steam-powered vessels is simple. A ship moves forward based on its speed. You can make one 45-degree turn at the end of its movement. Those order cards I mentioned earlier can allow you to make a turn before you move. At the end of your move, you can change your speed based on the acceleration characteristic of your ship. Each battery on a ship has a line on the ship card. Shooting is resolved for each battery on a ship by a 2-hit roll of 1 or more D6s as indicated on your ship's card for the battery you are firing and the arc the target is in. The base target number is determined by the size of your target. There are also modifiers for things like range, and then a save roll for each hit based on the size of the gun versus the armor type of the ship. If you fail a save roll, you take damage cards. Damage cards may reduce characteristics like speed or hull points, or have other negative effects. Very big guns may also instantly destroy a poorly armored target outright. Damage comes in two flavors, yellow and red. Of course, the red ones are worse. You can repair the yellow ones, but you cannot repair the red ones. Finally, there is an end phase where you can resolve certain other conditions like adding flooding tokens, etc. The second day of the Battle of Hampton Roads seemed like a logical place to start. The winner would be whomever did the most damage to the opponent's Ironclad by turn 10. It is March 9th, 1862, and the CSS Virginia and her escorts are on their way to finish off the Minnesota, which had run aground on the first day of the battle. The Union Ironclad, the Monitor, emerges from behind the Minnesota, and the first Ironclad versus Ironclad battle of the war begins, changing naval history forever. In our game, the USS Minnesota and the shore battery did not have much of an effect on things. The Dragon was sunk, and the Confederates seemed to have the upper hand for most of the battle. But in the final turn, an accidental ram by the Monitor delivered more damage to the Virginia than the Monitor's Dahlgren guns ever did in the game, and turned the tide in favor of the Union. The perfectly even encounter battle is so rare in history, but so common on wargaming tables. For our second game, I wanted to toss equal points worth of ships on the table and see what happens. I think most of the ships were from the Battle of Mobile Bay supplement. I think it's called Damn the Torpedoes. I played the Union again, and I wanted to see if wooden ships could close in and deal some damage, so included some of those in my force, and I went full speed for the Confederates. Confederate dice were very good, though, and medium and large wooden ships are, in fact, quite fragile, as you might expect. They are easy to hit and easy to damage. When my Ironclad, the Tecumseh, closed in and started getting shots on the Tennessee with its very large smoothbores, I thought maybe the Union could still win it. As the Tennessee was the majority of the Confederate points, I focused my attack on it. I even managed to stay reliably on the Tennessee's tail for a number of rounds. Again, the dice, though, there was one round in particular where I really felt I had the Tennessee dead to rights, but did absolutely no damage whatsoever. Ultimately, the Tecumseh succumbed to multiple leaks and sank. I guess it was a better, or at least more exciting end than the Tecumseh had historically. I believe it was hit by a mine in the Battle of Mobile Bay and went straight to the bottom with 90 souls on board. For our third game, an encounter on the river. I wanted to do something at least inspired by the river combat that was such an important part of the war, and this was again even points per side with the goal to sink more points than the other side by turn 10. Once more, I commanded the Union ships. I really enjoyed the ram, Queen of the West, which I rammed right into the first available target. In this case, it was the CSS Gaines. I would have preferred the Arkansas as a target, but I did not expect the Queen of the West to survive very long if the Confederates decided to shoot at her, so I went with the first available target. A head-on collision with the Arkansas and the Carondelet followed, and that was an intentional ramming on the part of the Arkansas. The Arkansas came out on the better side of that, as you might expect. I was left with the Cincinnati, which fortunately made a derelict of the Arkansas and proceeded to sink the Little Harmony, which was trailing behind the other Confederate ships, a Union victory. I like these rules. They're simple, fast to teach, and easy to learn. Small games with 3 ships a side can be done in 2 hours or less, even if you are slow, like my group. I like the damage cards. Real ships don't have hit points. The cards give you the feeling of individual components and things going wrong during the battle, while not being overly complex. There are still hull points, of course, that usually determine when your ship sinks, but the damage cards add a flavor that you wouldn't have if you were only subtracting abstract points from a total. This is not a detailed naval simulation, though, with pin tables and angles and lots of math. If that is what you want, you should probably look elsewhere. My personal feeling is that you are unlikely to be able to create a playable, detailed, deep simulation for this sort of thing, but others may disagree. I did not have a problem with the order system in general, but we rarely used orders other than the hard turn cards and occasionally the evasive action card, so maybe there's something else that can be done there. Speaking of turning, I think some of the ships, especially the Ironclads like the Virginia, felt too maneuverable. As completed, the Virginia had a turning radius of about 1 mile and required 45 minutes to complete a full circle. I thought that Wikipedia article should have a southern accent for some reason, or some type of southern accent, or some type of bad impression of an accent. Anyway, I wonder if ships should have some sort of unmaneuverable trait, maybe, that would limit their turns to 15 degrees instead of 45, or maybe 30 degrees. Just a thought. In conclusion, I recommend giving these rules a try if you have any interest in the period. There are many ways to get started with or without miniatures. In the grand scheme of the miniature wargaming hobby, I think the barrier to entry is actually quite low. You can go the digital route, as I did, print your ships with a 3D printer, or just make some paper counters to get going. You could even scratch build ships with balsa or other materials if that is something you enjoy. The designer has some articles about scratch building on the Scary Biscuit website. If you are a game night project manager, Dawn of Iron is a great addition to your repertoire when you don't know how many people will show up. If 3 or 4 or more people show up, you can easily divvy out the ships so everyone can participate. If someone has to leave early, another player can take over their ships. That sort of flexibility is very advantageous in my group. I think it's a great game, and we'll be playing more games, more scenarios soon. Hope you enjoyed this video and found it informative. I will see you in the next one.